Good evening. This is your host, Dan Zupansky, for the program True Murder, the most shocking killers in true crime history and the authors that have written about them. My program tonight was going to be with Linda Rosenkrantz, and she was going to be discussing her book, Ripper. However, I got a call today from her, and she had to cancel, and we've rescheduled the interview for April 28th. So that's in 2 weeks. Linda Rosenkrantz will be talking about her book, Ripper. I've taken this opportunity this evening because it's really hard to book anyone else, and it really is an opportune time because my book, my first book, my true crime nonfiction book, Trophy Kill, the Shall We Dance Murder, the Trial and Revelations of a Psychopathic Killer, was to be released today on the 15th, and however, there's been a delay at the printers, and it will be released, however, on Friday. However, if you were to go to my website, trophykill.tv, or the publisher's website, Prohypticon Publishing in Toronto, you are able to advance order the book and save $2 or $3 as a result of this. So you can go to trophykill.tv for the book if you'd like. And what I'm going to do tonight is talk about the book, and I'm going to open the lines so that if anybody would like to call and talk about this, I have had a video out posted on YouTube, again, directing people to the website trophykill.tv since May of 2008 for a couple of years. So we've been doing some advance promotion of this book for quite a while. Let me just introduce the story for those people that do not know. I had done an earlier program concerning this book, but this will be a little bit different. We get people to call in and ask questions specifically about the book, things that they are interested in knowing about specifically. On July 1st, 2003, the Miramax movie Shall We Dance, starring Jennifer Lopez, Susan Sarandons, and Richard Gere, was being filmed in Winnipeg. The next day, Sidney Tierhus walked into a police station claiming that he had awoken from a drunken blackout to discover a man dead in the bathtub. He maintained he had no memory of the killing. Police discovered the victim cut into 8 pieces, decapitated, disemboweled, sawn in half with all of the internal organs missing. The dismembered and mutilated corpse was posed, crudely reassembled, with Susan Sarandons' gold necklace found a few feet away from the murder horror spectacle. Through a fateful turn of events, journalist Dan Zupansky has an opportunity to correspond with the killer. He gains his trust and is eventually sent a series of shocking letters and diagrams outlining every graphic and horrific detail of the murder, organ removal, and sex with the corpse. Contacts authorities with the evidence he has and is suddenly thrust into the trial as the prosecution's star witness testifying against the killer, desperate to see him sentenced to life in prison. Prosecutors have the burden to prove that Sidney had the necessary intent to kill. If they fail, Sidney walks the streets again. Discover the incredible role that Susan Sarandons' stolen necklace had in the motive for one of the most horrifying murders of all time. Trophy Kill, the Shall We Dance Murder, the Trial and Revelations of a Psychopathic Killer. And what are included are the killer's revelations, trial transcripts, and 15 pages of shocking drawings. So what we're going to do is go to our caller now and see who we have and see what this person is interested in knowing about this I have to say, if I have to say myself, a very, very interesting and incredible story. Yes, caller, good evening and welcome to the program.
Hi, my name is John. How are you doing, Mr. Zupansky?
Oh, very good, thank you.
First off, I just want to say I found out about your book from a cool video I saw on YouTube a few months ago, and I visited your website. A few questions. First of all, it must be nice, so this isn't a question, but first of all, it must be nice to have a big budget, very nice video. And is there a documentary about the trial?
Well, that's a good question. There is a planned and always was a planned accompanying documentary about the trial, about the case itself, and we just want to make it simply call it Trophy Kill as well. That documentary is still not finished, but we've taken the footage from the planned documentary And the video that you saw, like I said at the opening of the show, we posted that on YouTube a couple years ago and on my website as well, trophyguild.tv. We also have, in the next couple of days, as part of our promotion for the book, 2 more videos that are going to be posted on YouTube and all kinds of other video sharing sites that are very popular these days, and that is one of the ways that we're going to be promoting our book. So I'm really happy to hear, John, that you did get to see that video on YouTube, and that directed you to our website. What else would you like to know about the book?
I also wanted to know why call the book Trophy Kill, and who came up with the title?
Well, the book, the killer himself, Sidney Tierhuis, wanted the book to be called Trophy Kill, and the reason why I picked Trophy Kill wasn't necessarily because he wanted that title, but the most important reason was that it's the most appropriate title for the book, and I don't want to give everything away, but if people were to know what a trophy kill is, and I think most people do know what the definition of a trophy kill is, a controlled kill, it does refer to hunters that pay to go somewhere and hunt game and then are guaranteed that they are going to get this, what they call trophy kill. Like I said, it's the most appropriate title for the book, and it just so happens that it is the title that the killer actually wanted for the book itself. If
so
that
does
answers
the killer
your question.
actually implement that that his victim is like a deer or something to be slaughtered, like a game?
Well, I don't want to give everything away from the book itself, but he does refer. If you read the trial transcripts that are on the website itself, he does refer to the victim as a human trophy. So let's just keep it at that. You read the actual documents. What's interesting, and that I had the opportunity to purchase the transcripts. I was corresponding with the killer himself, so the actual documentation is one of the big features of this book. The actual authentic documentation is included in this book.
Oh, I see. I know that Susan Sarandons' stolen jewelry was found at the crime scene, but why also title the book "Shall We Dance Murders"? What does their stolen necklace have to do with this story?
Well, the thing is, as I mentioned before, the jewelry was found at the crime scene, very close to the victim's dismembered and mutilated body. And very quickly, the police determined, from whatever, I'm not sure for what reason, but they determined that the necklace had nothing to do with the crime scene itself. I won't go into too much because that would be another story of what I think the reason why the police determined that this necklace and the stolen jewelry was not part of the motive for this. But in the book, as I've said, discovered the shocking role that Susan Sarandons' jewelry did have in this. And I will just tell you that you're going to have to read the book if you really want to find that out. It's a little too involved what it's about, but definitely Susan Sarandons' stolen jewelry is involved in the motive for this killing, despite what the police determined very, very early on. And I won't go into it too much more, but I'm telling you that there is a very good reason why the jewelry was stolen, and it is a very interesting story how the jewelry becomes involved or is involved directly with the motive for this killing itself.
Interesting. And how did you get involved with this case?
I got involved with this case. A gentleman that I know called me from a remand center awaiting some charges. And I wouldn't say that we were close friends, but we were associates. And I had met him originally in Thunder Bay. We went to high school together. So this is many years later. He had moved to Winnipeg. I had relocated to Winnipeg in 1994. He had relocated, I think, a few years before. So we bumped into each other a few times, and he had visited at my home. And shortly after that, he called me from the remand center and said, listen, I've been in some trouble. These charges they aren't going to stick, and they didn't stick. They were charges that were eventually dropped. But the reason why he asked me to call him was because I guess that's it's a lonely time being incarcerated. I don't know, but I was good enough to at least correspond with him. A few months after our correspondence began, he'd give me a call maybe once a week or so, and he asked me who was in the same jail range as he was. I had no idea. He mentioned the name Sidney Tierhus. The name didn't click immediately. The murder itself had occurred in July, and I was speaking to my friend on the telephone about his cellmate, or his now roommate here, Sidney Tierhus, about 6 months later in January. But when he mentioned that this was the person that had cut up the person at the Royal Albert, of course I remembered I had cut out the clippings from the newspaper. I'd been doing a radio show for about 3 years at that time. One of the things I was interested in was the law and some of the things that I had seen that I was opposed to. And so I asked my friend if he could ask Sidney Tierhus, the killer, if he'd be interested in an interview. And to go back just a little bit, as soon as the killer was arrested, he was granting interviews to the media, particularly the Winnipeg Sun in Winnipeg, and extensive interviews, which, as you may know or not know, it's kind of unusual for somebody to do that. So I recognized this person wanted to talk, and as a result, I thought, well, maybe this would be a really good opportunity to write a book here. And it was more intuition than anything else, but I decided to do that, asked my friend if he could ask Sidney Tierhus if he was interested, and of course, he was. So that's how I got involved with this case and this story.
I understand this murder occurred in Canada, but it sounds like an open and shut case, and I'm sure one day he might be released on parole, but there's no way he'd be able to get parole before he's a very old man, not after admitting to the bizarre killing, coming in, admitting to it, and,
Well, the thing is, I think you're living in the U.S., you're not familiar with Canadian law. We do have...
It's totally different than... Like this remand, I didn't understand what that was. Things are a little different, but there's no way he'd be eligible for parole, because this guy, with all the heinous, all the stuff he's done to this individual, that there's no way that he'd be out till he's an old man, because he's, in his 30s, so he probably, for at least 30, 40 years.
Well, that's not the way it works, pardon me. What happens is that the parole is set... there is no actual life sentences in Canada. There is no such sentence as an actual life sentence without parole. So there's no... We start off with that. We don't have the death penalty. A lot of the states in the U.S. don't have the death penalty. Lots of states in the U.S. aren't actually executing people, even though they have a death penalty. But the way we start is that we do not have a sentence of life without parole. We do not have, say, you may have heard of Robert Picton in British Columbia, the pig farmer that is accused of killing upwards of 49 women.
Yeah.
However, he was tried for 6 women, and despite being sentenced for 6 murders, he still only is charged with 1 in terms of sentencing. There's only a consecutive. There is no consecutive sentencing. It's called concurrent sentencing. So we also have even voluntary intoxication can result in a charge being reduced from first or second degree murder to manslaughter. Even though manslaughter, a life sentence is allowable in following precedent, according to what the Canadian law says. A lot of these sentences are around 4 years in total for something that would be considered murder in the United States. We are having cases where it's considered manslaughter because alcohol is involved or provocation is involved. And we had something that was just changed by the conservative government, which is very similar to your Republican government, a more conservative government where that government ended the 2-for-1 credit for pretrial custody time. So a person would spend, say, 3 years in custody awaiting their trial. That would count as 6 years. So you can see that how you could get easily in 3 or 4 years somebody released from prison doing their full time for a charge that would, in the United States and other jurisdictions in the world, will be considered murder.
Wow.
So there is that difference in Canadian law. So why there was this urgency and this desperation for me, and why I was personally afraid of anything other than this person being convicted of second-degree murder, is that certainly if he was convicted of manslaughter, he would be out before he's 40 years of age.
Wow.
And he would realize that I testified against him and betrayed him. And there's much more to the story. Anybody that's capable of doing this, in my personal belief, should never be released from prison, let alone in a few years. There is no fixing, and that's why the title of it, I do talk about the psychopathic mind and consider this a psychopathic killer. So I'm maybe getting a little bit ahead of you on some of these questions, but
yeah, I didn't know that about the Canadian law. It's quite different. But did Sidney Terhune pay for his defense, and who was his lawyer?
Well, in Canadian law, unlike, again, American law, and I'll continue, is that in American law, if you do not have the funds for defense counsel, then a lawyer will be appointed to you.
Right.
And that lawyer that you're appointed doesn't mean you're bound to use that lawyer, but that's the way it works. You do not have your personal choice of whatever lawyer you want, maybe a lawyer in another state. It doesn't quite work that way in the United States of America, where in Canada, the lawyer in this particular case, to show you a really good example, has defended more killers than anybody else in the English-speaking world, and he's almost at 700 cases, which I don't know if you, that sounds like a lot of cases, but it is. To put in perspective, he has conducted the most and been involved with the most murder trials in the English-speaking world, which means there's not many more people that have ever been involved with more murder cases. Now, the government paid for this trial, and many and most murder trials are paid by the government, so it's a little different rule. And this lawyer being that experienced, again, I have a little bit of a problem with a lawyer gaining this much experience on the public tab. And then another part of the story, again, I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself, but the book does talk about what that lawyer will do in his mind, how he defines his obligations as a lawyer, and specifically what I talk about is that under any type of the foundation of the law itself are a couple rules, and one of those rules is that the defense lawyer is not to lie on his client's behalf, nor put his client up on the stand to lie, to perjure himself.
Come on, Mr. Zupansky, you're holding out here. You gotta let the cat out of the bag. Who is this lawyer, and give some famous cases he's known for. You can't keep us in suspense until the book comes out. Come on, the public wants to know.
Well, the lawyer's name is Greg Brodsky, and Greg Brodsky is a well-known Winnipeg lawyer, but operates in a couple other provinces. And the case he's well known for is battered women syndrome. And that case he spearheaded in Canadian courts. It had been decided in American courts just previous to that. I think the case that people would remember the most about him, especially in America, would be that he was on the defense for Paul Bernardo in his appeal. After his murder trial, Carla Homolka, Paul Bernardo, famous Barbie and Ken murder torture couple. Anyway, these guys were...
so he defended them.
Well, I mean, I don't have any problem with a lawyer defending anyone. Someone has to defend these people, and that's the cornerstone of our judicial system. I think people get that wrong and don't misunderstand my position. It's just the extent, what will, I don't want to get into this dry conversation, but it is, there is a part of the book we'll talk about what his responsibilities are. What I did was, I was a bit sneaky, I got to admit, and I was corresponding with the Greg Brodsky's client for a year. I had all kinds of information. And I was doing my radio show, and I asked Greg Brodsky to come on my radio program to interview him. And like he asked at the trial, he says, well, you were trying to discredit this case. What I was trying to do with the information that I had was just find out what this whole process was. This was an incredible learning experience for me. And so what I wanted to know was how, if you are not to tell a lie and you're not to let your client tell a lie on the stand, then how do you determine the truth? Maybe I'm being really simplistic about it, but that's what I wanted to know.
Straightforward to me.
Pardon me?
That sounds pretty straightforward to me, but there's another title of this book, The Trial and Revelations of a Psychopathic Killer. What did the killer reveal to you, and why would he do that?
Well, I don't want to give everything away, but what he did reveal to me was the time of death, the motive, as far as I'm concerned, and I did say my bit in court about that.
Interesting.
Where the organs were, with the whereabouts of those missing organs, which I thought was very important. It also clearly refuted that he couldn't remember any details of this surgery, basically. He revealed evidence to me that ended up being corroborating physical evidence and other forensic evidence at the trial. The information that he revealed to me, as the newspapers, the Free Press, the Sun, the judge, the Crown, everybody admitted, was the most important part of the trial.
What was it like hearing and reading about all those murder and dismemberment details and all that gory?
Well, I got to say it was real difficult in the year, because he would call me on the telephone and he would obviously send me letters. There was some information that he might tell me on the telephone, and I would say, well, you should include that in your next letter. Write that down. So we really did have a book project that was going on together. He did realize we were writing a book. And the information that he told me that ended up being the evidence at the trial, because I came forward and said, this is evidence. I'm not going to hold back on this. I'm going to bring this evidence to the Crown Attorney, the prosecutor in this trial, because this is evidence. I asked a couple journalists, one journalist that I was very friendly with, and they said, you don't have to go to the prosecution with this evidence till after the preliminary is over. However, when I talked to a law professor from Toronto and a former Crown Attorney, they said, no, you should, you have the moral obligation to bring this stuff forward because it is evidence. Because it speaks to motive and physical evidence like the whereabouts of the organs itself. So what was it like? It was incredible. I got to admit, in a weird way, it was exciting to be getting this kind of information because I had read these kinds of books. Not that these are the only kind of books I ever read, but it was communicating with a genuine psychopath.
Wow.
I mean, slowly but surely he revealed himself to have that kind of mindset where a psychopath will be talking about something very serious and then talk about something that's real insipid, real inconsequential. Wow. And that's not even a poor example, but it took a fair amount of time before the details of the actual killing came out. Before that, he gave me an incredible amount of information about his background, about his life. He was adopted when he was just an infant, or put into foster home, and the people that had him in the foster home eventually adopted him 3 years later. But he was an Aboriginal man, a young person, adopted, and brought from a small community of about 350 people where he would have been raised and where his family was. He instead was raised by a family named Tierhuis, which is a Dutch name, and these people are not Aboriginal, and he was raised in the city. 8th biggest city in Canada, Winnipeg is, and he come from this little place like 350 people, a remote reserve.
I'm sorry to jump, but the question when you mentioned earlier is in the back of my mind. I'm sure a lot of other listeners are curious. What did the killer do with the victim's organs?
Well, you're going to have to read
the book.
You're going to have to read the book. I don't want to give that away, but again, the actual documentation when it refers to what happened is in the book, and it's it was evidence that was deemed admissible at trial. So that information was there. Many of the letters that talk specifically about the murder, which were quite a few letters, and what the book features is, rather than interspersing those letters throughout the book like many books might have, because they don't have the volume of letters, or for whatever reason, I've decided to put these letters all together and put a special warning on this, because I think a lot of your listeners, I did a program a few weeks ago with Steven Singular, who did a story about BTK. BTK is one of the worst criminals in terms of taunting police, taunting the victims, and then reveling in his revealing of circumstances surrounding the murder and the sexual background of what he did with these victims, and some of them children. There have been other killers as well. That another one was The Creation of a Serial Killer by the late great Jack Olson.
Okay.
Basically, it almost sounds like an account of the serial killer himself. He's the happy-faced killer from Seattle. He used to drive truck and killed a bunch of women. And what he talked about is the sheer callousness, of his. It's beyond lack of remorse. His disdain and treating these women like garbage, like nothing, like objects. And I think the true crime audience that's out there has read a few of these books. There are quite a few of these killers. However, it's not something to brag about, because this makes it difficult for some people. The revelations of this killer are not just random. They apply to this victim, and I think and he talks about other murders as well, that these revelations are the most shocking revelations I have ever read, and they're very hard. They are very hard to read, and included are 15 shocking drawings by the killer depicting the murder, and I won't say any more, much more than that. So, and this is not, and I want to stress that this is not gratuitous. This is not in there just to shock you. This is in there because this was included in the trial. It was deemed necessary in the trial. They have something called prejudice. If the information, the evidence is prejudicial to the jury, doesn't have any value other than just to shock the jury, it wouldn't be in there. This material was in there.
You're not a trained professional or lawyer. You just seem like an average Joe, journalist. But what was it like knowing you had to testify against a killer at a trial, and how does the prosecution prepare you to testify? Like, you're not a professional or anything. Like, what was that like?
Well, knowing that I have to testify against them, of course, trepidation is the word I would use. I mean, I was scared. I mean, at one point the trial was supposed to go on in 2006, and I had a little meltdown. I remember going back home, and anyway, I won't go into it, but it was like a meltdown because I was so stressed about everything. I also wanted this not to be a story that was in vain, that no one would, or not enough people would know about. I mean, I did not write this story for fame and fortune, or certainly for profit. This story is an important story to me. So, anticipating testifying against this killer, with everything that was at stake, you got to remember that I was being told by a fair amount of people that he was not going to be convicted of second-degree murder. What? And I realized that I could be involved in hurting this case, and again, I won't go into it. You got to read the book. There's an incredible amount of, but the thing is that how they prepared me is another part of the case. I don't think they really did. They spoke to me a couple times, but again, I was feeling all this trepidation and fear, and the prosecutor treated me like. It's hard to describe, and that's why I include the conversations verbatim in the book, because it's hard to describe right now when you ask me. it's something that you need to read for yourself, and you tell me exactly what was going on there. But I can tell you personally that maybe that's not their job, but I didn't feel that secure before this trial. The thing that made me feel the most secure is that I had advice, really good advice, from a friend of a friend who happens to be a Crown attorney in Thunder Bay, and gave me the background on how a murder trial really works.
Wow.
And how a defense lawyer may go about trying to discredit me or trying to question me, trying to cross-examine me. So I think just having that help, that, you know, it really made me feel a little bit more confident before I went to trial about the case itself.
Wow.
I can just say that.
What was it like to be questioned on the witness stand? What was the experience like? And would you say it would be more questioned or interrogated?
Well, it's not an interrogation. I wasn't being interrogated. You know, an interrogation is what the killer would have went through. A cross-examination is, for people that don't know, I mean, if you watch Law & Order, there are times, and they do show many lawyers, that will push the envelope, or their sense of what's ethically allowable is different than someone else. So everybody has seen that, I think, on at least on Law & Order, one of the more popular shows. The thing is that
were they trying to discredit you on the stand, and what did it feel like?
Well, the thing is, once I was on the stand for about 45 minutes, I thought that the defense lawyer wasn't as prepared as I thought he may have been. So it seemed like, instead of the slickness of Law & Order, where it's very, I would say, what's the word? I mean, what I would say is that it feels very calculated on TV. Obviously, they've written a script. In real life, there are no oppositions. The Crown attorney, the prosecutor, did not object to the line of questioning that the defense lawyer did. It almost seemed like I was on my own. So the first 45 minutes, of course, I'm sitting on the edge of my seat, but a combination of me realizing that this is the way it really was, and the one thing that the Crown attorney had said to me, and I think this is very important, and I will tell you about this, is that the Crown attorney asked me specifically, there was one thing that the killer had sent me in the last letter, and had said that everything he had told me previously was a lie and was fiction, and it was just based on the true crime stories of John Wayne Gacy, Dennis Nielsen, which is the Jeffrey Dahmer of England, Aileen Wuornos, the female serial killer in the U.S. who killed her clients and robbed them, and Ted Bundy. Now, he said he put all those stories together and made a fictional story. And why he said that was that I had notified him that the law had just passed preventing criminals from profiting off the notoriety of their crime. He hung up on me and sent me a letter and said, I didn't hear anything about it. I think you're just trying to rip me off. By the way, everything I've told you is a lie. It's just based on serial killer stories. And at trial, and before the trial, the Crown attorney, the day before the trial, when I saw her, one day before the trial, she asked me, pardon me?
Didn't Sidney also say that he totally blacked out and he couldn't remember anything, but yet he gave you, what did you say, 10, 15 pages of gratuitous violence of these acts that he drew out?
Well, of course, that's the thing. I mean, like I mentioned that. Of course, most of the information clearly refutes that he had a blackout at all. But that's not really, that doesn't really describe the revelations. Because that would be easy to say, okay, he doesn't remember it, that's fine. And I believed in my heart of hearts that I would find that out very quickly or soon enough. But there was no real motivation for Sidney to send me the letters that he did and tell me about the things that he did, other than he wanted to relive, rehash, revel. He wanted to re-enjoy what he had done. He wanted somebody to know. And when you look at you read all of these books, which are about serial killers.
Okay.
The mindset of the psychopathic killer, the mindset of the serial killer, is that these people eventually want to tell somebody more than they want to evade capture. It is their demise. However, it is a burning need after a while. When you look at the happy face killer, he had to contact police because somebody else, weirdly enough, had confessed to his first murder.
So
he went out of his
pattern. There's a pattern to all these serial killers.
Well, the thing is, like you say, Sidney was charged with one murder. However, I talk about the serial killer profile itself, and in that serial killer profile, all I'm saying is that Sidney Tierhuis fits the serial killer profile perfectly, like a carbon copy. Now, do I have any evidence? Do I have the names of the victims, and do I have their remains? No. At the same time, I can tell you, without giving you any detail, that I have made advances, we'll say. I've made inquiries about the possibility that he has killed before. I have tried, to a certain extent, to investigate if there is any information about potential other murders. What I'm talking about is he fits the serial killer profile exactly. And that serial killer profile, not every serial killer fits that profile. Well, what we're talking about is not a profile to predict who he is and to determine, here's the crimes and now I'll find him based on this profile. The profile is much better when you do it afterwards. When you use the profile to say, this killer fits all of these other serial killers, method of operation, shares signatures, those unique aspects of the murder that they continue, they may accelerate. A lot of the features of the serial killer, the worst of the worst, are that they want to contact the police, they taunt police, they want to taunt the victims, they want to undermine their victim, try to rationalize their deaths, try to achieve their own celebrity from what they're doing, and can't believe that people think they're such a bad person. It's an incredible, psychopathy is an incredible thing to witness when it's right there in front of you. I witnessed a genuine psychopath accused of one of the most horrific murders ever known. In the taunting, the posing, the reassembling of the body, the calmly walking into police and saying, hey, listen, I blacked out and I found this guy in the bathtub. Not preparing the police for what they found, which I call a murder horror spectacle, because even Jack the Ripper didn't take all of the organs, remove them as just to gain notoriety.
That's exactly what I was just going to say. Like this, for him to do this just once, the first time, to cut up, to execute, and yet Jack the Ripper never even took away the organs. And then where are the organs? And to do all this, such a heinous crime, to cut it off and then say, I don't remember, and then draw, great detail. I understand that Sidney took the stand in the trial. What was it like, and how did the killer act when he testified? Like, to be so cold, and like I say, the reason why I asked that question is to tie it in. How could somebody do this just once? Execute this so perfectly, drawings, everything, and then come to the police station and go, I blacked out, I can't remember. And then when you go in the trial, what did this person say? What was it like? That must have been bizarre.
Well, the thing is, I testified on a Monday and he testified on a Wednesday. And on the Wednesday, his lawyer starts off by examining. It's called a direct examination, where he asked him questions, the equivalent of not very hard questions. He talked about his life growing up, and of course Sidney talked about, not of course, but I guess you don't know, but he talked about being abused by his stepbrother or his adopted brother, and being also having some kind of sexual relationship with his mother. And then he talked about, which of course I didn't know and the prosecution didn't know, he was charged for exposing himself to a paperboy, 2 charges. So that's the only criminal charges he had. And then he went on and tried to create a story about how he had always been blacking out, and when he blacked out he would find himself somewhere else and not remember any details. And of course this blacking out phenomena started when he was really young. And so he was trying to build that up by his lawyer asking him questions. And again, I mean, they were faced with an incredible task. Not only does he admit to the killing, they just are trying to say that alcohol, because he was impaired from alcohol, that he didn't have the intent to kill. Also, at the same time, they have to defend against the letters that clearly talked about his enjoyment of the killing and how he did remember everything. And so of course, they have a very, very uphill battle. So the direct examination basically starts creating some stories about what happened that day. It's a fairly involved few-hour procedure. The really interesting thing is when the Crown Attorney, the prosecutor, gets to question him, because it's very unusual, American law, Canadian law, anywhere law, that the defendant goes up on the stand to defend himself, especially in a case like this. However, it seemed like he had not much to lose, and it is his prerogative to go up on the stand if he wants to. Whether his lawyer disagrees with it or not, his lawyer can disavow himself from the case, or revoke, or anyway, he doesn't have to participate in the case. If Sidney Tierhuis wants to take the stand, he can take the stand.
Did you think that Sidney would take this witness stand, and why?
Yeah, I did, because again, it fits the psychopathy of a killer, the psychopathic killer. It fits the serial killer profile perfectly. Of course, he's going to want to take the stand. This is the culmination of his ultimate fantasy. He wants to be famous. Of course, he wants to take the stand. I predicted it. I predicted it long, long before I knew he would want to take the stand, and he did take the stand. The only thing that I was wrong is that I thought he would use it as his real soapbox, that he'd get up there and interrupt the court or threaten me or make a big speech. I was almost certain that something would happen. The biggest outburst he did do was he called I think he called the assistant Crown Attorney a bitch and gave her the finger. And he said to the police officer, the arresting police officer said, "I will not tolerate this effing lies on the stand." Well, that's it. So I was wrong in that he didn't really perform, but the thing is that it was subtle because the papers didn't pick up on it. Anybody that picks up the book will read this in the transcripts that are included. And his testimony is included almost completely. My testimony is included almost completely. Why? Not because I'm lazy. It's incredible testimony.
What would you say was the key to the trial? Was it his?
Well, his words were used to convict him. So everything he wrote to me, which coincidentally or incidentally, he wanted this material to be released after the trial. He's not a stupid man. He's an intelligent man, but it doesn't mean he isn't foolish. It doesn't mean he isn't delusional to a certain extent. So he wanted all this information to come out. When he was on the stand, he looked more relaxed than anybody else in that courtroom, I swear to God. He looked so nonchalant. When he was being questioned, I'm just going to go back a little bit. When he was questioned on the stand, the Crown Attorney asked him, "You consider this guy just a piece of meat?" And he said, "Well, I suppose so." "Well, what do you mean, don't suppose?" Wow. "Did you?" "Yes." "He was disposable to you?" "Yes." So something to that extent. I could get the quotes, but I mean, to that extent, what he admits in his testimony is incredible. And
did the killer have any say about other murders? Any hinting of maybe this wasn't the first one he did, or was this lover piece, like you said, piece of meat, lover thing, his trophy, his altar, his god? What?
He talked about very early on. He sent me a letter about. I asked him, "Can you send me a letter about when you were first questioned by police?" And he was first questioned by police. He said to me that they had asked him about other murders, similar murders, especially apparently a young man who ended up in a bathtub in similar condition to this person. And I thought, wow, that's incredible. I would have never heard about that. However, he does talk about these other murders, and he does talk about how the cops asked him, to do the right thing, and you put this guy through a lot of misery and his family, maybe do the right thing, think about it. They left the room and came back, and he said his mind was a blank. But they accused him of killing all these young men as they continued to question him. Later in the book and later on in our correspondence, he sends me a letter and poses the question if I think he's a serial killer, and which serial killer he most closely resembles. So I won't go into any more of that, but I think that might pique your interest. And I do have a chapter in the book called Serial Killing, and an interview with a gentleman named Robert K. Ressler, which, for anybody who's been reading true crime for any time, Robert K. Ressler, John Douglas, these guys are the serial killer profilers, the pioneers of this profiling science, we'll say. And how they did this is that Robert K. Ressler and a couple other associates and John Douglas, but especially Robert K. Ressler, went and interviewed the most notorious serial killers in the world, which just happened to be in the U.S., Gacy, Bundy, Manson, Berkowitz, Ramirez, all of these guys, the worst of the worst, were interviewed extensively, and there is where the serial killer profiles were created.
Well, isn't it okay? I'm sorry to interrupt you, but another Canadian crime, the Picton, isn't that once he was convicted, they found out that there's more bodies, not just a few, but then after they found out that there is more than just a couple. And I think now, aren't they still even finding bones and parts?
Well, the Picton story is a different case, and I mean, the thing is, with the Picton case, he was only charged for 6 murders. There was a good possibility of another 26, but the incredible cost of the trial, again, taxpayers footing most of the bill, even though this guy had a fair amount of land and is half or part landowner out there in a valuable property in British Columbia. However, the incredible length of the trial and incredible cost, and again, if you have a concurrent sentencing, you can imagine the length, the time, and the incredible cost to little effect to have 26 separate murder cases. In fact, the 6 murders right now, they're still considering whether the judge may have instructed the jury improperly, and there still is some threat. There's still some threat of doing it all again, having another trial.
Wow.
So,
what my question was, the correlation with the Sydney case is, you had the trial, he's been convicted, but maybe now as you go back and you start researching more, that you're going to find out that this isn't the first time, that there is more out there that he has done.
Well, the thing is, it's much easier to say and speculate, and again, if he fits the serial killer profile, it's still, we don't have any other bodies. So the only thing that can possibly happen is that Sydney at some point, for some reason, may admit to other murders, realizing that the sentence he did get was 25 years to a potential life sentence, 25 years before he's eligible for parole. Now, I don't know. Certainly, there's a real good possibility he's going to be let out in 20 years. I mean, it doesn't mean he will, but there is a possibility that he'll be out in 20 years. I'm going to be at the parole hearing. I'm going to apply for intervenor status. I'm going to try to show the parole board. I'm going to try to use the pressure with the media at that time to reignite this story or to remind people of what the crime that he was convicted of and what he went on and did say in those letters, which was deemed truthful by the judge. These, regardless of what he says about the 4 serial killer stories, and the Crown Attorney asked me specifically, she said, is there anything to these 4 serial killer stories like he says? I said, no. I said, the only thing that they have in common is that Dennis Nielsen and John Wayne Gacy and Sidney Tierhuis are bisexual or homosexual. That's about it. And they dismembered their victims. And she said to me, when you're asked that question on the stand, you are to say that there is some comparison between those other crimes. Otherwise, Mr. Greg Brodsky will turn you around, Mr. Zupansky. Do not think you're much smarter than you are. Wow. Now, I didn't listen to her, and when I was asked the question, I had a whole involved thing that I was going to say, but I just said nonsense. I said, he asked me a couple times. I just said, no, that's nonsense. Yeah. Because it is nonsense. I have those books. I've done some of those interviews. I've interviewed Sue Russell, the author of the Aileen Wuornos story, Lethal Intent. It's ridiculous, especially comparing that story. But even the other stories, there is nothing from those stories that could have been included or was included at all in the story that Sidney Tierhuis gave me about this particular murder. There is nothing. You know, well, the appeal... Pardon me?
All this information, this would make a great movie or a documentary, almost kind of like Brokeback Mountain meets Jack the Ripper. It's quite a... I tell you, it's just unbelievable, and to know that this guy could be out on parole, you think that guys like this, they would take the key and throw it away, lock the door and throw away the key.
Well, that's one of the things. It's very simplistic, but I am not. I think the Canadian judicial system has some very good things that the government has changed in the last few years. We do not have the throw away the key type mentality or the 3 strikes and you're out. I won't get into that too much, but okay. The thing is that I am very concerned with is that there is no actual life sentence. We just had a case where a person that was deemed not criminally responsible, insane, killed a person on a bus, decapitated him. There was some cannibalism. You've heard of this case. It was a Greyhound bus about a year and a half ago. Incredible case, and the psychiatrists are talking about, with medication, letting this person out in about 5 years. And, of course, the family, the mother of this gentleman, Tim McLean, is outraged. She can't believe that they would talk like this. And then we have, like I say, the case of people, what anyone in their right mind would call a murder. Of course, there are certain times in court where there has to be plea bargains made, deals made because of the difficulty for various reasons, no witnesses, uncooperative witnesses, but we're talking about routine, where it seems that murder is manslaughter. It becomes less and far less time.
Like, would you think, because of this case, it's 2 Aboriginal males, do you think if it was an Aboriginal male and an 18-year-old white blonde girl that was decapitated and all that, do you think that...
Well, I know what you're saying. Of course I know what you're saying, and I agree with you, but that is the nature. I've asked many people this question too. That's the way the public acts. When it's a prostitute, of course, and I hate even calling the person referring to them by their occupation, and it's not even their occupation. It's their unfortunate position to be in is a prostitute. And so, but yet that's who the psychopathic killer, the cowardly killer, the serial killer picks as a prostitute. This gentleman was referred to at the trial as a homeless alcoholic. I never saw any evidence to prove he was an alcoholic. I never saw any evidence to even show he was homeless. At first, he came from a reserve, which was a couple hours away from Winnipeg, to come in for Canada Day and to visit his sister.
Well, did he have a legal address?
I couldn't get that information, but what I'm saying, there's no reason to depict him as a homeless alcoholic. There's no reason to talk about a female victim as a prostitute, we'll say, because what it does, it allows people to rationalize why some people are more apt to be a victim than other people. The reason why they're a victim because they're vulnerable and they're available and no one will miss them likely. This gentleman here, like you say, you make the point, well, if it would have been an 18-year-old white woman with no criminal record from a good, upstanding, high-profile family, yes, you would have a completely different case, you would have a completely different story, you'd have a completely different reaction to this victim. Do
you think the government would then change the law to say life imprisonment for, say, such a heinous crime if the situation, the elements were different?
I think that in light of a case like this not really getting full national news exposure, national coverage, it was on a CTV television across Canada. It was carried by the Canadian press across Canada, but not a genuine national story. We have the Bernardo Homolka, we have the Robert Pickton, and this story seemed to not, they didn't want to know about it for some reason. The thing is that all of these cases are good examples of cases that the Canadian public should read about and everybody should read about for just the stories themselves. They're fascinating stories. They're incredible killers. They're unique crimes of murder, shocking, bizarre cases, interesting on every single level. So I don't know if that answers your question, but
yeah, it does. It was really nice talking to you, Mr. Zupansky, about the trophy kill. And the next question: where's the best way to get a hold of the book? Where is it available? How do I get it?
Well, you went to the website before, and I thank you for asking. You go back to Trophy Kill, one word, trophykill.tv. That will refer you to the Trophy Kill store, which is on the Prohypticon publishing website. Prohypticon is spelled Prohyptikon, so that's why I get you to go to the website, trophykill.tv. It's just a little bit easier. You can get the book now on advance, order it in advance and save yourself a few bucks. It's a bit pricey, but we've got a great cover. It's a very collectible book. It's about 400 pages.
Nice. Good reading.
And it's been great that you spent this time asking me these questions. I'm sure you didn't plan on being on the show all night, but I really appreciate you showing your interest in this, John, and I want to thank you very much. Like I say, go to trophykill.tv, and you can get yourself an advance copy of this. Watch for the videos. Again, we'll probably label them Trophy Kill again. Why not? 2 more videos, very interesting, one based on CTV news footage, and another one is particularly scary that at first will only be on the website. The actual words of Sidney Terhune and his actual drawings, but again, produced by the same documentary group that did the last video. This one is just too scary to describe, I'm telling you. Go to the website in a few days and see that. And again, I want to thank you very much, John, for the call. I want you to have a good evening.
Good luck, Dan, with the book, and I look forward to reading it, and I look forward to seeing a movie or something that's tied to the book.
Well, thanks very much, John. You have a good night, eh?
You too.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye. You've been listening to the program True Murder, the most shocking killers in true crime history, and the authors that have written about them. Join me next week for Sheila Johnson with the book Bloodlust. And like I said, the interview for tonight with Linda Rosenkrantz and Ripper will be rescheduled for April 28th, same time, Wednesday, 8 o'clock. Have yourself a good evening. Susan Sarandons' stolen jewelry is involved in the motive for this killing, despite what the police determined very, very early on. And I won't go into it too much more, but I'm telling you that there is a very good reason why the jewelry was stolen, and it is a very interesting story how the jewelry becomes involved or is involved with the directly with the motive for this killing itself.
Interesting. And how did you get involved with this case?
I got involved with this case. A gentleman that I know called me from a remand center, awaiting some charges. And I wouldn't say that we were close friends, but we were associates. And I had met him originally in Thunder Bay. We went to high school together. So this is many years later. He had moved to Winnipeg. I had relocated to Winnipeg in 1994. He had relocated, I think, a few years before. So we bumped into each other a few times, and he had visited at my home. And shortly after that, he called me from the remand center and said, listen, I've been in some trouble. These charges they aren't going to stick, and they didn't stick. They were charges that were eventually dropped. But the reason why he asked me to call him was because I guess that's, it's a lonely time being incarcerated. I don't know, but I was good enough to at least correspond with him. A few months after our correspondence began, he'd give me a call maybe once a week or so, and he asked me who was in the same jail range as he was. I had no idea. He mentioned the name Sidney Tierhus. The name didn't click immediately. The murder itself had occurred in July, and I was speaking to my friend on the telephone about his cellmate, or his now roommate here, Sidney Tierhus, about 6 months later in January. Good evening. This is your host, Dan Zupansky, for the program True Murder, the most shocking killers in true crime history and the authors that have written about them. My program tonight was going to be with Linda Rosenkrantz, and she was going to be discussing her book, Ripper. However, I got a call today from her, and she had to cancel, and we've rescheduled the interview for April 28th, so that's in 2 weeks. Linda Rosenkrantz will be talking about her book, Ripper. I've taken this opportunity this evening because it's really hard to book anyone else, and it really is an opportune time because my book, my first book, my true crime nonfiction book, Trophy Kill, the Shall We Dance Murder, the Trial and Revelations of a Psychopathic Killer, was to be released today on the 15th, and however, there's been a delay at the printers, and it will be released, however, on Friday. However, if you were to go to my website, trophykill.tv, or the publisher's website, Prohypticon Publishing in Toronto, you are able to advance order the book and save $2 or $3 as a result of this. So you can go to trophykill.tv for the book if you'd like. And what I'm going to do tonight is talk about the book, and I'm going to open the lines so that if anybody would like to call and talk about this, I have had a video out posted on YouTube, again, directing people to the website trophykill.tv since May of 2008 for a couple of years. So we've been doing some advance promotion of this book for quite a while. Let me just introduce the story for those people that do not know. I had done an earlier program concerning this book, but this will be a little bit different. We get people to call in and ask questions specifically about the book, things that they are interested in knowing about specifically. On July 1st, 2003, the Miramax movie Shall We Dance, starring Jennifer Lopez, Susan Sarandons, and Richard Gere, was being filmed in Winnipeg. The next day, Sidney Tierhus walked into a police station claiming he had awoken from a drunken blackout to discover a man dead in the bathtub. He maintained he had no memory of the killing. Police discovered the victim cut into 8 pieces, decapitated, disemboweled, sawn in half with all of the internal organs missing. The dismembered and mutilated corpse was posed, crudely reassembled, with Susan Sarandons' gold necklace found a few feet away from the murder horror spectacle. Through a fateful turn of events, journalist Dan Zupansky has an opportunity to correspond with the killer. He gains his trust and is eventually sent a series of shocking letters and diagrams outlining every graphic and horrific detail of the murder, organ removal, and sex with the corpse. Contacts authorities with the evidence he has and is suddenly thrust into the trial as the prosecution's star witness testifying against the killer, desperate to see him sentenced to life in prison. Prosecutors have the burden to prove that Sidney had the necessary intent to kill If they fail, Sidney walks the streets again. Discover the incredible role that Susan Sarandons' stolen necklace had in the motive for one of the most horrifying murders of all time. Trophy Kill, The Shall We Dance Murder, The Trial and Revelations of a Psychopathic Killer. And what are included are the killer's revelations, trial transcripts, and 15 pages of shocking drawings. So what we're going to do is go to our caller now and see who we have and see what this person is interested in knowing about this. I have to say, if I have to say myself, a very, very interesting and incredible story. Yes, caller, good evening and welcome to the program.
Hi, my name is John. How are you doing, Mr. Zupansky?
Oh, very good, thank you.
First off, I just want to say I found out about your book from Cool.
Like I said, it's the most appropriate title for the book, and it just so happens that it is the title that the killer actually wanted for the book itself. If
so
that
does
answers
the killer
your question.
actually implement that that his victim is like a deer or something to be slaughtered, like a game?
Well, I don't want to give everything away from the book itself, but he does refer, if you read the trial transcripts that are on the website itself, he does refer to the victim as a human trophy. So let's just keep it at that. You read the actual documents. What's interesting, and that I had the opportunity to purchase the transcripts, I was corresponding with the killer himself, so the actual documentation is one of the big features of this book. The actual authentic documentation is included in this book.
Oh, I see. I know that Susan Sarandons' stolen jewelry was found at the crime scene, but why also title the book "Shall We Dance Murders"? What does their stolen necklace have to do with this story?
Well, the thing is, as I mentioned before, the jewelry was found at the crime scene, very close to the victim's dismembered and mutilated body. And very quickly, the police determined, from whatever, I'm not sure for what reason, but they determined that the necklace had nothing to do with the crime scene itself. I won't go into too much because that would be another story of what I think the reason why the police determined that this necklace and the stolen jewelry was not part of the motive for this. But in the book, as I've said, discovered the shocking role that Susan Sarandons' jewelry did have in this, and I will just tell you that you're going to have to read the book if you really want to find that out. It's a little too involved what it's about, but definitely.
Video I saw on YouTube a few months ago, and I visited your website. A few questions. First of all, it must be nice, or this isn't a question, but first of all, it must be nice to have a big budget, very nice video. And is there a documentary about the trial?
Well, that's a good question. There is a planned, and always was a planned, accompanying documentary about the trial, about the case itself, and we just want to make it simply call it Trophy Kill as well. That documentary is still not finished, but we've taken the footage from the planned documentary, and the video that you saw, like I said at the opening of the show, we posted that on YouTube a couple years ago and on my website as well, trophykill.tv. We also have, in the next couple of days, as part of our promotion for the book, 2 more videos that are going to be posted on YouTube and all kinds of other video sharing sites that are very popular these days, and that is one of the ways that we're going to be promoting our book. So I'm really happy to hear, John, that you did get to see that video on YouTube and that directed you to our website. What else would you like to know about the book?
I also wanted to know why call the book Trophy Kill, and who came up with the title?
Well, the book, the killer himself, Sidney Terhune, wanted the book to be called Trophy Kill, and the reason why I picked Trophy Kill wasn't necessarily because he wanted that title, but the most important reason was that it's the most appropriate title for the book, and I don't want to give everything away, but if people were to know what a trophy kill is, and I think most people do know what the definition of a trophy kill is, a controlled kill, it does refer to hunters that pay to go somewhere and hunt game and then are guaranteed that they are going to get this, what they call trophy kill.